begin. So welcome everyone to tonight's Housatonic CCC meeting. My name is Toby Berkman. So I am a senior mediator at the Consensus Building Institute, or CBI, the same organization where Pat Field works. So as many of you may have seen by email, Pat has transitioned off of this project. So I'm taking over as facilitator for this group. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to meet some of you in person. Look forward to meeting those of you who aren't here, who are joining us from online. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time introducing myself, just to say I've been at CBI for 10 years. I'm a lawyer by training. I hope you won't hold that against me. But I left that law practice because I do believe in the importance of dialogue, in the potential value of dialogue across difference, across difficult issues, although I know it can be very hard. So I'm excited to be here, looking forward to working with you all, getting to know you all. And some of you I've had a chance to actually speak with in one-on-ones. And I want to encourage every CCC member, if you're interested in speaking with me, you're very welcome. Reach out. It can be a confidential conversation. It can be a one-on-one conversation. Some of them EPA might like to join, but that's up to you completely. So totally optional. It can be confidential and one-on-one as well. So let's go ahead and get rolling with just a little bit of our operating procedures by way of introduction. So the purpose of the CCC is up there on your screen. The purpose here is to serve as a vehicle for community involvement in the implementation of a settlement agreement between GE Pittsfield and the government. It's also to be a mechanism to ensure that all parties to the negotiated agreement are able to honor their commitment to listen, to learn from, and incorporate the ideas and concerns of the community to the greatest extent possible. In addition, to enable representatives of diverse interests in the region to communicate with each other and provide community input and structured feedback to GE and the government. Okay, some meeting procedures just to name briefly. The CCC is not a negotiating forum, so community input and information exchange will be the focus of meetings. CCC meetings are open to the public and to the press, so I see we have some members of closed circuit TV, I believe, that are broadcasting this meeting right there, so we are open to the press. Meetings will be facilitated, so I am in that role here today. And meeting highlights will be drafted by the facilitator, or the facilitation team. So I have my colleague here, Brandon, who's taking notes and will be drafting our meeting summary or meeting notes, and then posted on the website for the remediation project. So this particular meeting is being recorded, and meeting notes with an attendance list will be generated. Just a little quick note on the process for developing those notes. So CBI, Brandon, and myself, we develop those notes. We then give them to EPA, and EPA makes comments on those notes. Those comments are made in red line, and we then send out the red line and the updated draft to the CCC for any additional input. We then incorporate that input and it's finalized. And the goal of the red line is just so you all can see, for transparency purposes, any changes that EPA has suggested. We want to just note, so this recording and the notes may include personal information. So that could, for example, include the name, home address, other personal information if provided. Okay, so and those notes are going to be publicly disclosed. The recordings will be publicly available. So if you do not want that information made public, you just don't share it in the meeting. Okay, and it won't be made public. Okay, Brandon, anything you want to add on those points?
Nope, that makes sense.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Just briefly here on the roles and responsibilities of CCC members. So members are expected to strive to attend all meetings or send in alternates, bring their concerns and information from constituencies to CCC meetings. So this assumes checking in with them before and after meetings, accept that each constituency is one segment of the larger community, and that all views are important to include in the dialogue. And then, of course, maintain and act with respect in meetings, which is defined as treating every individual, including those you disagree with, in a way that gives them the benefit of the doubt, does not start with the presumption of negative motives, avoids accusations, and is consistent with how you would want to be treated. Okay, so with that housekeeping out of the way, I just want to briefly do a little more housekeeping on the tech side of the front. So we have some folks joining online, obviously. We are running this meeting in a webinar format, which should not impact the experience of anyone in the room or CCC members who are joining online, but it is a little bit different for those of you who are not CCC members of the public who are joining. So just for your information, if you're a member of the public, you are joining this meeting as an attendee. If you are a CCC meeting, we've sort of given you a little bit of special status. You're joining as a panelist. It just means we see the CCC members automatically. If you're a member of the public, when we get to the public comment section and you want to make a comment, great, we very much welcome that. You'll just raise your hand, and then when it's time for us to call on you, we will make you a panelist. And then you'll be able to be seen and speak in front of the group. For anyone who wants to raise their hand and speak, raising your hand if you're joining by phone is *9. Okay, if you're joining by phone. And then if you want to unmute if you're joining by phone, that is *6. Right? And that applies both to CCC members and those folks who are joining as members of the public. In addition, there are some Zoom buttons that you can use to raise your hand if you're joining via your computer, which is, I think, probably most of you. But there's a raise hand function down there that you can use. In addition, there is a question and answer button if you're joining from the public. If you're having an issue with technology, you're trying to make a comment that something isn't working, you can put that in the question and answer field. That'll get to my colleague Brandon, who will then be able to deal with it. I'm hearing a bit of noise. Could we try to mute some folks who are making that extra noise? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I want to just briefly do some introductions of new CCC members who have applied to join the CCC. So we have Deborah Kelly, representing Lennox Against the Dump. And Deborah, is Deborah in the room? I
think she's online.
She's online, okay. So Deborah, you're welcome just to say a quick word of welcome to introduce yourself and let folks see your face. So Deborah, I believe you should be able to unmute and start speaking.
Okay, thank you so much. Great to be at the meeting tonight. I'm co-chair of Lennox Against the Dump. We've just organized in October of last year, and I'm anxious to be here, see what people have to say, and to introduce the information to my group. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Deborah. And in addition, we have Julia Thomas, who's applying to be the member, and Jared Weber, applying to be the alternate representing the Clean Berkshire Collective. Julia, are you with us? Do you want to just say a word?
I think I am. I get nervous speaking in groups, so I think I'm here. Hi, my name is Julia, and I co-formed this group, the Clean Berkshire Collective, with Jared Weber and Phoenix Haynes also in October, working closely with Deborah and her group, and our goal is to really try to mobilize groups, especially my generation, the people who previously maybe didn't know that much about the situation, and to try to kind of maximize the opportunities for public input and kind of do so through an environmental justice lens. So very excited to be here and to be part of the process.
Thanks so much, Julia. So just, I think, as a formality, we need to just give an opportunity for any objections to these new members being welcomed as members of the CCC. Any objections? Okay, hearing none. Welcome. You're officially now members of the CCC. Okay, so we want to just briefly go over the agenda today. This was sent out to those of you joining online via email. In addition, those of you who are in person, there are physical copies over there if you don't have one. But just briefly, based on some feedback, just want to note there have been some changes to the agenda with the goal of making these meetings as productive and meaningful as possible. So specifically, there's been some change in what I understand has been your typical order of the meeting. So we're going to be hearing the EPA presentations, and then the TAG grant update, and then have CCC discussion and Q&A, followed by public comment. So the goal here, to be clear, is to ensure that all time-sensitive information is shared with you all. I've heard that in some past meetings there's been just time issues and some issues haven't been gotten to. But we do really want to be clear that CCC dialogue, public comment is incredibly important to this process. So I've asked EPA to make sure that their presentations are done in as expeditious a manner as possible to make sure that we have that time that we need for public discussion and CCC member discussion. So Charlie, I see your hand. Do you want to raise an issue here?
Yes. We disagree that the TAG grant update should have gotten pushed back after all these other presentations.
Yeah.
Traditionally, it's always been the first thing on the agenda.
Yeah.
And we're actually concerned of why that decision was made.
Yeah.
To move it back. It just seems, especially since we finally have a new TAG grant administrator that we would like to introduce to everybody. And this is probably the time when most people are going to be on. And we'd like Dr. Hermanson to be introduced now. At the end of all of these other things, people may leave and like that. So I would like to request that we actually change the order of the agenda and move the TAG grant information to now and then go to the EPA.
So Charlie, thank you for the suggestion. I think that the purpose of this, again, is to get all the information out in front of folks. We're not going to take any time away from the TAG update. And I think we don't want to spend time in this meeting debating the agenda. That said, if folks want a different way of setting these agendas moving forward, I think we can definitely talk about that. Right? We do want to make sure that it's inclusive and working for everyone. Okay. So I'm gonna press forward with, and if this is a comment on the agenda, I'm gonna press forward with the agenda as is. And again, we can have further discussion about that later in the meeting if necessary. Okay, so with that, I think this just died.
I have a procedural question.
Okay. Procedural question. Okay, well, we don't have a microphone, unfortunately.
I'll speak loudly.
Yeah. Let's use this one. Yes, procedural question. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept his request to have
Okay. So we're going, again, we are very happy to have discussions about how agendas are set and what agendas for future meetings should look like and make sure that folks are comfortable with that. Okay? So that's again something we discussed. We're not going to change the agenda during the meeting. Okay? If folks want to have a conversation about future agenda setting, not in the meeting itself, we're happy to do that. Okay? So I'm going to hope that we can get a new microphone here because this is going to be very hard for EPA to do their presentations, but I can hand it over now to EPA.
Right, so I assume if I use this one, everybody online can still hear me. Is that right? Can we get a thumbs up or something?
Yes, we sound good.
Okay. I'm gonna take this back. All right, so hi everybody, thanks for coming out in the rain. My name is Andy Laughlin, I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency. Dean Tagliaferro, who is a longtime team leader on the site, and I know a lot of you are familiar with him. He is out sick, so he is not participating tonight. We have some other members of the team that are with us. Rich Fisher is one of the project managers. He is also not participating tonight. In the room here, we have Chris Smith. We have Josh Fontaine. You also see his name online. That's only because he's running the slides. We have Alex Carley Dorsey, who is showing himself on camera right now. Hello, Alex. We also have 2 site attorneys, John Kilborn, who's here in the room, Tim Conway, who I think I saw online, and from our community involvement and public affairs folks, we have Ashlyn Brooks here at the table, and Joanne Cottrell out back over there. Kelsey Dunville is not here tonight, she's on a detail, so she's going to be off the project for a few months, but welcome everybody. So onto the agenda, and I will try to get through the agenda items very quickly. Oh, sorry, Josh. But it's, again, I'm just going to probably just spend a few minutes on each of these things, and you know, we can get to the tag update and the Q&A as soon as possible, because I know people have things that they want to talk about. So let's go on to overview of Reston River.
It's not on the agenda.
So Charlie's making a point that
It's
this,
not on the agenda. The overview of Reston River is not listed on the agenda.
Charlie's right, overview of Reston River isn't listed on the agenda. I'll take 2 minutes, all right?
Obi said we're not going to change the agenda.
I object as a member of the CCC. If you're not going to consider it the member of the CCC and their agenda, then why are we not going to comply with the agenda?
Hey, folks, I think, the point here is just for folks who are new to this, get a quick overview. If the CCC is not on the agenda, right, Annie, I'm going to ask you just to briefly cover the points, because they're right, we have to keep to the agenda and keep on time here, okay? Make sure that we have time for discussion.
Okay. There is one point here that we wanted to address that speaks to a question that Claire, you had. So I think that this is, again, we're just going to take a couple of minutes. And I'm not going to read these slides for you, but again, the one point that I did want to make, because there's been a lot of press, there's been a lot of questions about this, but the Reston River cleanup is going to take 3 or 4 years to design. That is not just the UDF. That is the excavation, hydraulic pumping, addressing the river sediment, the banks, the floodplain soil. So all of that work has started. It did start when we issued the permit in 2020, and that work has continued despite the challenge in court or whatever. GE was required to start that design, which includes a lot of pre-design investigations going out, sampling in the field. So that design is ongoing. Again, it's going to take 3 to 4 years. The entire remedy is going to take 13 years to implement. That really almost has no bearing on whether it's trucks or rail. The sheer need to excavate or otherwise hydraulically pump or get this contaminated material out of the river and the surrounding environment is going to take a long time. That's the only point I wanted to make here. The primary risks, again, driving the remediation are human consumption of fish and waterfowl, direct contact to certain floodplain soils for an extended period of time, and of course there's an ecological risk to wildlife. Josh, did you want to speak to Claire's issue?
Yeah, sorry, my fault that this was off the agenda. Claire, this was specifically added about your questions of the Town of Lee's open space and recreation plan that's in draft. What we wanted to convey to you was that we have received the draft plan. We're in the process of reviewing it. We don't have time to, didn't have enough time to prepare for this meeting, but we will be following up with the Town of Lee, and we'll also follow up with you. That's why it wasn't included on the agenda. This was supposed to fill in that, so I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to the next slide. I really won't spend any time here. This is a map that many of you have seen often. It just shows the different reaches of the river. Reach 5A in Pittsfield is the section of the river where the cleanup is going to start. And actual excavation or dealing with that contaminated sediment, riverbank, floodplains, backwaters is not going to start until 2026 at the earliest. And again, this is really independent of the UDF or the landfill. We are designing how we're going to get this material out of the river. So that's the only point I wanted to make. And with that, we can move on to the transportation and disposal plan. So this is a subject of a lot of aggravation and anxiety. I'm aware of that. GE submitted this plan. The public input runs until February 1st. So we've had this open for 90 days public input. I just want to emphasize to people that this is only the first draft of the transportation disposal plan. It's not the final. We know that GE did not adequately evaluate rail, and our comment letter back to GE is absolutely going to say you need to do better evaluation of rail. We've already communicated this to GE, and they have started some activity to start evaluating rail. We have also gotten a lot of public comments already. I think we have comments from 50 different entities and individuals already, including detailed comments from the town of Lee. So that's all great. We're going to consider all of that information before we issue our comment letter. Okay, thanks.
You can go for it.
All right, this is awkward. All right, thank you. We've done a mic switch for the people online. And one thing I just want to note as well, so GE is going to submit a revised transportation and disposal plan, and that will also be available for public input. So this is just the start of the process. This is not the final. I don't want people to be anxious about the fact that it seems like we've discounted rail entirely. That is not correct at all. So, next slide. And with this, we are going to try to turn this over to Alex Carly Dorsey, who is online, and let's see how the technology works.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, cool, yeah, so again, you said my name is Alex Carly Dorsey, and I'm just going to try to give a quick overview of the adaptive management plan and the quality of life compliance plan. These are both two plans that are actually open for public input right now. So the adaptive management plan was submitted by GE on November 21st, and that's public input period is open until March 1st. So in the revised final permit, GE is required to implement an adaptive management approach during the project and when conducting corrective measures. So this plan kind of explains how they're going to meet those requirements. The overall objective of the adaptive management approach will be to maintain and improve the efficiency of the project, mitigate short-term impacts, and ensure the remediation activities are successfully completed, ensuring that work is consistent with the permit and that the targets and objectives in the permit are also met. And the adaptive management process will ensure that successful design elements, construction methods, equipment, and techniques that are identified early on can be built upon and built forward future in the project, while less successful items can be identified, refined, modified, or eliminated entirely if need be. So what this essentially means is that GE will take into account lessons learned, new information, changing conditions, and other sources of new or useful information or opportunities into account when working on subsequent portions of the project. So for example, lessons learned in Reach 5A can be applied to future work in reaches down the river, and then like so on and so forth. No specific examples of modifications or adaptations are listed in the plan, as these won't really be known until work begins. Any adaptive management response actions that are identified and then also accepted by GE and EPA will be formally documented and then incorporated into any relevant plans and the record. And again, this public input period for the plan ends on March 1st, and you can submit any input you have to EPA Housatonic at epa.gov. So moving on to the quality of life compliance plan. We received this plan from GE on December 20th, and the public input period ends on March 29th. And this plan specifies how GE plans to address certain quality of life related standards for air quality, noise, odor, and lighting, how they plan on coordinating with local governments, potential impacts to recreational activities, road use impacts, and assessing road conditions both before, during, and after work is completed, and also coordinating with affected residents and landowners. For this presentation and for time's sake, we decided just to focus on actual standards themselves and also coordination with residents. So I'll start with kind of the details on the standards. As I mentioned, the plan provides details regarding air quality, noise, odor, and lighting standards, and also kind of defines some of the values for air quality and noise, and includes examples of some control measures, which we'll get to as well. It also describes how monitoring will be conducted for air quality and noise to ensure compliance. So of the 4 standards, air quality and noise have an actual numerical value, which we have here. And GE will be conducting quantitative monitoring for both of these parameters during work activities to ensure that exceedances don't occur. For odor and lighting, which are a bit harder to assign numerical value to, potential instances of excessive odor or lighting will be observed by EPA, GE, contractors working on the project, or through complaints from residents and landowners, and then GE will investigate those complaints for instances of excessive odor or lighting. So, let's get some of the control measures. So the control measures here, actually, can we go back to one more slide, John? Sorry. Can we go back to the actual standards? Yeah, thank you. So for the noise standards, I just want to give a few examples because some of the decibel values might be kind of hard to understand how loud these numbers actually are. So I have a couple examples here of things to kind of compare them to for a reference point. So like as you can see here, there's residential, nighttime, daytime, and then also a non-residential standard. So some reference points here, 60 decibels. These are things like having a normal conversation or using an electric toothbrush. 70 decibels would be like operating a washing machine or a dishwasher. Then 80 would be like a noisy restaurant setting, using your vacuum cleaner or running your garbage disposal. These are kind of to help you understand exactly how loud the standards that GE is going to have will be. You can go on to the next slide now, Josh. Awesome, thanks. And then finally, we just have some control measures. And these are things that GE will set out to try and prevent exceedances of noise and lighting and prevent instances of excessive odor or lighting from occurring. Sorry, excessive air and noise monitoring. I'm not going to read through all the control measures, but here are some of the things that are going to take in place to try and prevent some of those instances from occurring. And again, the public input period for this document is up until March 29th. And you can send any input you have on either the adaptive management plan or the quality of life compliance plan to rwinhousatonic@epa.gov. And I think that wraps it up.
Hello. As introduced earlier, my name is Josh Fontaine. I'm one of the remedial project managers for the site. At request from one of our CCC members, the topic of LiDAR was requested to be discussed and presented at the meeting. So I have a couple slides just briefly going over what LiDAR is, and then a couple imagery examples that we've received specifically from the Housatonic River site already. So to start, LiDAR is actually known as light detection and ranging, LiDAR for short. It is a collection method that uses reflected light to quickly map topographic surfaces. Now, the system that's used in place is a sensor that will emit a light at a specific wavelength that will go to whatever surface is being mapped. Every surface will, or most surfaces, sorry, will reflect or bounce that light back towards the sensor, and based off of the time it takes and the quality of the wavelength that it receives in its place, it will be able to tell us depth perception, which can then later be used to help create topographic structure maps. One good note is this process is very quick and easy. It has a lot of accessibility where it can be attached to aircrafts. A lot of places that do LiDAR of large areas will be manned on an airplane, helicopter, whatever, and that will actually allow for a lot of data, and we're not talking about 1 or 2 points, we're talking hundreds of thousands of data points at any given time to enhance imagery of a certain section. In addition, there's also bathymetric LiDAR, which uses water penetrating light, which will allow us to create these map surfaces of underwater features. So for instance, at Woods Pond, bathymetric LiDAR was used, and I'll show that imagery in a second, that shows us shows us different potential thicknesses of sediments and where we have high and low points. That really went into play for us designing the pre-design plan, or pre-investigation design plan for Reach 6. So we have been using this data. Some other examples of the data that we've used has been at Reach 5A, where we've done a full aerial LiDAR, which actually also encompassed Reach 6 and the upland disposal facility. Also at 5A, there was some boat-mounted LiDAR of the banks. So used a boat down the river with the LiDAR sensing equipment attached to it and scanned the banks as they were going along. And then we've also done some bathymetric surveys at both Reach 5A and Woods Pond and Roslyn Pond dams. One thing to note is there are limitations with any type of technology. Specific with LiDAR, things we have to take into account are if there's any surfaces that may diffuse and affect the wavelengths that are going back and forth between the sensor and the emitter. And in addition, there also may be some ambient light that may cause some biased data. Fortunately, with the use of GPS and known benchmark elevations, that can be used to help qualify and enhance that data so that we know that we're accurate. So this next image, as I promised, as I skip it, sorry. This next image shows 3 examples of how LiDAR and bathymetric LiDAR have been used. The first one is of Reach 5A, which is the entire reach where we did some aerial LiDAR. The colorations that you see are based off of the depth and elevation or height of different features along the river itself. In the middle, we have Reach 6, which is the bathymetric data. That data is also depicted by color variations. In this specific figure, the darker colors, so that dark purple to the bottom right of the screen is actually the deeper area, and the red is the higher areas. The black lines are the path the boat took while collecting this data. One thing to point for this, we did determine that additional bathymetric data was needed. So some additional bathymetric LiDAR surveys were conducted this fall to enhance this image even further. And then the last image I have here is of the UDF. Aerial LiDAR, as I mentioned earlier, was used in that area in combination with other survey methods that helped create this output, which you can't really tell easily here, but there's a lot of lines that are close together. Each line represents a 1 foot interval, so it's showing the gradation at 1 foot intervals over time. Overall, LiDAR is a very effective tool. EPA is encouraging the use of it, and we intend to continue using it as we move forward with designing the cleanup of the Housatonic. Now I'm going to pass it off to Chris Smith for an update.
Hi everyone, Chris Smith, another one of the project managers for EPA. Who do questions in the middle?
No, we're not doing questions in the middle. Yeah, Charlie, you have a concern about something?
Well, you talked about LiDAR, and I had...
Yes, of course, actually, thank you, yeah. So Charlie, please, you need to make a request, yeah?
I was not aware that LiDAR was being used at the site, but I recently became aware of LiDAR as an important technology. I created a document and I submitted it to both Toby and Brandon to present here, and then subsequently had an online meeting with Josh, who said, yes, we are using it, showed me those same slides. I would like my document that I have submitted to you to be attached to the meeting notes, because it gives a lot of links for people who want to become more familiar with the technology.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it. So Charlie's requested that these be attached to the meeting notes. Any objections? Here, okay. They'll be attached to the meeting notes, Charlie. Thank you. Tim, you have a question on this?
Yeah, on LiDAR, I'm curious.
Okay, so Tim, we're gonna do Q&A after the presentations. Okay, so to jot down your notes, want to give you a chance to name them, ask your questions, whatever discussion you make, we're gonna do them after the presentation. Okay?
All right.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to leave.
Okay, thanks everyone. Like Josh said, my name is Chris Smith. I'm one of the project managers working on the GE site, and I wanted to give a brief update on the PCB Toxicity Reduction Challenge. So some of you may recall that in the settlement agreement, one of the things that EPA committed to was facilitating the opportunity for research into PCB treatment technologies, with the idea being that they could potentially be used at the GE site or at least at other sites across the country. So The way we're going about this is through what's called a challenge. Challenges are run across the federal government by different agencies. There's procedures for how you go through them. We're working with EPA's Office of Research and Development, who is a branch of EPA that helps with challenges that are run by EPA. So the challenge is envisioned to be 2 phases. In the first phase, we would provide companies or institutions, academic institutions, the opportunity to submit plans for how they could treat or destroy PCBs in a way that's cost effective. And if we can identify suitable technologies in that first phase, there could potentially be a second phase where we would offer them the opportunity to do some testing on PCBs from the GE site. So we're working through that internal process. Like I said, it's kind of governed specifically by how these federal challenges are run. We have begun to reach out to some of the local environmental groups as well as the towns and the city of Pittsfield to gauge their interest in being involved in the challenge process. And we will definitely be reaching out to folks again as we get a little bit more information as to how exactly the challenge will be implemented. But that's it for now, so more to come on that.
So one last topic that I wanted to go over very quickly is about navigating the EPA website. This is mostly because we've received a lot of feedback that people don't know how to use the website from both CCC members in addition to public. So I have a couple slides here that I'll share briefly to show key links and where to find things. So when you go to the EPA website, first off, you will be greeted by this scrolling bar at the top. My cursor is yellow, so I'm hoping that will help people online and here to be able to see it. At the very top, right now it says upcoming meeting. There's about 4 slides right now that changes through that provides updates and needed to know information. The area that we did revamp for the website was down here, which is this rest of river section on the website, which I have blown up on the right side of the screen, which takes you to what we call special collections that house all the documents associated with that topic. So for instance, if you're looking for anything dam related, if you went to dam inspections and related documents, you would be able to find the operation maintenance plans, any recent inspections, monthly inspections at Columbia Mill Dam, and the such. In addition, at the top of the webpage, to the right, there is a opportunities for input on the Housatonic River permit submittals. This will keep you updated on the public input period, when that's closing, and any documents that are currently open for that. Right now we have about 4 documents that are open for public input, which I'll be sharing on a separate slide. This is just reminding that any input, please send it to r1housatonic@epa.gov. That's the main email that is monitored by pretty much the entire team, and we're able to communicate and share that input with the respective project managers, whoever's covering those specific topics. So the documents that are for open input right now are the Transportation and Disposal Plan, the Adaptive Management Plan, the Quality of Life Compliance Plan, and both the 2023 Annual Visual Inspection Reports for Willow Mill Dam and Columbia Mill Dam. Their respective input due dates are listed on the screen and also on the website. And please, again, provide any input to r1housatonic@epa.gov. If for some reason you have any issues running or dealing or navigating the website, please feel free to reach out to that email, or you can reach out to our Community Involvement Coordinator, Ashley Brooks. She is more than willing to help navigate and also get you in touch with whoever might be the right person to discuss any specific topics. For upcoming submittals, we have a busy 2 months for submittals. The first 2 big ones that this group will mostly be concerned about will be the revised final UDF PDI investigation summary report. That is expected by January 29th. And then in addition, there's the UDF final design plan and operation monitoring and maintenance plan that is expected on February 28th. The agency really recommends reviewing those documents together. So for that, we'll ensure that the input period for the revised final UDF PDI investigation summary report matches the deadline or the input deadline for the final design plan and operations and maintenance plan. And then I'll pass it back to Toby.
Great, thanks so much, Josh. So I'm going to hand it to Charlie now for our TAG grant update. I understand we have an introduction of
Right, but I have something else to say, actually.
So Charlie, why don't you do the introduction for Dr. Hermanson, and then we can open it up for discussion.
Can I also mention there's a guy that's had his hand up for about half an hour now, and you ought to listen to what he has to say. You know, I mean, you just cut him right off. This, you know, it's just really bad the way you're running this meeting. It's not for the citizens.
Right, so we'll give you a full chance to speak in a moment, and then you just talk about how we do these agendas and meetings are run, we can do that as well. But Charlie, I want to give you a chance to introduce Dr. Hermanson.
Yes, after a number of years, HRI is pleased to announce that we have a new technical advisor for our technical assistance grant. His name is Dr. Mark Hermanson. We are thrilled to have him on board with us, and he is online, and I'd like to just say one other thing about the TAG update. We've actually been extended until 2027. We've got an extension of the TAG, so it was going to run out next year, and we're extended to 2027. So again, Dr. Mark Hermanson, I'd like you to be able to introduce yourself, your credentials, and say a little bit, and welcome aboard.
Well, hello, and thank you very much, Charlie. I appreciate having the opportunity to be the technical advisor to HRI. I am a bit familiar with the issue at the Housatonic because I once worked in a lab that analyzed fish from apparently the Connecticut sections of the Housatonic River back in 1992. So yes, I've heard the Housatonic, but now I'm hearing even more. My experience with analyzing PCBs in the environment goes back to 1986, and we have analyzed PCBs in air, fish, tree bark, and worked on a number of projects around the country, including southeastern Delaware County in Pennsylvania, the Akwesasne Mohawk Reservation, and a number of other contaminated sites. So there's a lot of background material, a lot of experience that I intend to bring to this, which of course is a different site, but is dealing with some of the same kinds of issues that the other sites have been dealing with for decades. I would like to mention that my postdoctoral program where I got started with PCB analysis was with Ron Heitz at Indiana University, whom you may or may not know died about 2 weeks ago. And his passing is quite an event for his many graduate students and postdoctoral students. I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm doing a lot of background reading and watching a lot of presentations that are being made here and so forth. And I would like to make one comment, if I may. And that is regarding the air quality standards that are proposed for this cleanup. There's a notification limit of 50 nanograms per cubic meter of PCBs. They didn't use nanograms, they used micrograms on on the list. And there's an action level of 10 nanograms per cubic meter. And the comment that I will make about this is that in all the years I've been analyzing PCBs in air and looking at PCB air data, I have never seen a number as high as 50 nanograms per cubic meter. And rarely seen an amount as high as 10 nanograms per cubic meter. And I would just like to interject, for the record, if that's permissible, that some years ago, EPA Region 3 came out with a risk-based concentration for ambient air of many, many different potential air pollutants, including lead, mercury, cadmium, PCBs, pesticides, and so forth. And their risk-based concentration guideline, which was not enforceable for ambient air, was 3.1 nanograms per cubic meter. And the numbers that are being used as air quality standards for the Housatonic, of course, are much higher than that. I haven't seen how these air amounts are justified, but I look forward to finding out that information as I go forward with this. Again, I am fairly new to this process, having joined in the latter part of 2023, and so I have a lot of information to look at to become more familiar with what's going on, but I appreciate having the opportunity very much, and thank you.
Sean, do you want to say anything about, how, Dr. Hermanson will be used moving forward, kind of the role, or how folks at the CCC could connect?
I think what we expect is that Dr. Hermanson will be very busy, and that we would prefer that anybody who has questions for him actually come to us, HRI itself, and we will some of those questions we may be able to answer ourselves, and then, what we need to, we can get on and move forward to Dr. Hermanson. But I'd rather not have him.
Right. So you'll be the go-between. If people
Yes,
want to reach out, they can reach out to
go-between.
Yeah, okay.
And if he decides he wants to directly contact somebody who has a question, then that will be his decision. Well, otherwise, it's going to be us as the go-between.
Right. And the general role is he'll be sort of reviewing these documents that EPA comes out and sort of helping the community think about how it might want to respond. Yeah, great. Okay. So thanks. So thank you, all of you, for waiting to get to the CCC discussion, Q&A piece. Tim, I know you've been very eager to speak. We also have Josh, who's had his hand up for some time. So would you like to go? Would you like me to give it to Josh first?
Let Josh speak.
Great. Go ahead. So Josh, you'll be up first.
Thank you. I wanted to just say that while the transportation comments have been put forward from the 6 towns now, including West Stockbridge, there is concern that the transportation objectives of those 6 towns really are looking at the transportation locally from the remediation sites to the UDF. And where that leaves Lee out of the picture is that that the bulk of the transportation that is envisioned to be going on the roads in Lee is being transported from the UDF site to being out of state, and it's envisioned to be going down our small town Main Street. And I want to make sure that in the comments and in the discussions that we're having about examining rail, that the rail is not just simply for the local transportation, but it's also for the distance transportation. I want to now turn my attention to the quality of life report, which also makes the presumption that all the transportation will be done by truck, and it dismisses the possibility of rail. And that puts much of the other questions that are in the report, casts some doubt on them, because if there is a serious review of of trains, and then the train plan goes forward, then a number of the issues that are discussed in the quality of life plan are going to need to be changed. The thing that is most significant to me in the quality of life plan that I saw is that the noise regulations violate the town of Lee's noise regulations. They are far exceeding the regulations for our local town. And I want to find out if GE can simply violate our town bylaws and get away with it, or if the quality of life plan needs to be adapted to be compliant with the town of Lee's noise regulations.
So some comments there on the transportation plan and a question about if anyone at EPA knows the answer to this regarding sort of municipal regulations and whether GE could exceed those.
So I think the short answer, which is not really a direct answer to your questions, Josh, is that this is a draft plan. EPA has only just begun its review. We have taken note of your concerns, and we will definitely pay attention to this as we are reviewing the document. And then I would also encourage you to, you or anybody, to submit public input on this as well for our consideration.
That doesn't answer my question about whether or not GE has the right to trump local bylaws.
Do you know, John? Yeah.
So, Josh, John Kilborn. So, strictly speaking, the Superfund cleanups do not have to comply with local regulations such as the noise regulation. But as Andy said, we'll consider that. We'll consider that, but that's the answer to your question.
So what is the point of actually having these consultations if you are not going to comply with our town laws? I looked at the letter from the EPA to the town of Lee, and it was completely dismissive and quite rude to the town of Lee. I don't understand what is our point in sitting here and having these meetings if this goes into a void.
Well, Josh, I didn't say we weren't going to comply. You asked strictly whether, as a legal matter, whether we had to comply, and so the answer to that is no. That EPA does not have to comply with local regulations. However, as Andy said, we are going to be considering all comments, and a local regulation is something that we would consider. So. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. So it's something we'll evaluate.
Thanks, John. Okay, so Tim, would you like to? Actually, I'm going to suggest. I should have said this earlier. If you want to speak and you're in the room, put your card up. I think that's been the tradition in this group. Okay, introduce yourself so folks know who you are. Great, there you go, Tim. Okay, card is up.
I got the extra 3 inches.
You know, a letter was sent from the EPA. I think it was maybe Tuesday. And in it, they say the attachments to the town of Lee January 2nd letter include an affidavit regarding the volatilization of PCBs. EPA has fully addressed and rebutted this. Now, EPA has been, for years, we know it because we've been here for 20 years on the site, have been dissing David Carpenter, who is one of the leading PCB researchers in the world. And it's David Carpenter's position that they're saying is wrong here, is that he's saying that volatilization is real at this site. And the EPA continues to ignore this because they don't want to deal with it. And it's a real shame because it's really an important thing. It's a very important thing for people when they breathe PCBs. If you go down to the river, you're breathing PCBs. If you, live within a certain mileage of Woods Pond, you're breathing PCBs. Meanwhile, this letter says David Carpenter is basically wrong about volatilization. Now this is all I don't know if the word certified, but it's all in the published peer-reviewed papers in the literature, it's well established that PCBs volatilize. And I just want to say I'm tired of seeing letters like this that hint at PCBs don't volatilize. And you're doing that because that's what you want to make people believe. Thank you. Oh yeah, I have one other thing about LIDAR, okay? I would like to find out if LIDAR can pick up Indian artifacts. We now know of an Indian burial ground. How many more are they? Did you LIDAR or did you even investigate this? Indian burial ground, it's not good, guys, you know? And you know what, if there's one, this river is long, you know, it's 155 miles long. It's 155 miles long. And you don't think the Indians were all the way down, excuse me, the Native Americans were all the way down the bottom of the river and up here, probably camping at the UDF? So I think we should be using LIDAR to look for those things, because I think you're going to find a whole lot more of Indian, you know, artifacts out there. And, you know, you're not really doing your business, and I know you did a little bit of it, but you should be doing the whole river and figuring out where these sites are, where there are more burial grounds, because if there's one, I would assume it's very logical to say that there's a lot more down and along the river, so thank you.
Thanks, Tim. So does EPA want to respond on either the volatilization or
The burial ground issue, is that something we can respond to?
So I can talk about the, like looking for Indian or tribal sites. We have at least in Reach 5A right now, the first stretch of Russet River, there's been a Phase 1A cultural resources assessment that provided an overview looking at the entire area, using resources like LIDAR to evaluate areas where there is some likelihood that there could be artifacts or something like a burial ground that would obviously be important to the tribes. We continue to coordinate with the tribes on those issues so that they can review those documents, provide field oversight with us when that work's being completed. We just approved a Phase 1B cultural resources survey work plan for Reach 5A. In the spring, GE will be going out to evaluate areas where the remediation is going to be done in the floodplain or in the river, for example, to do a more detailed survey, including like test pits, looking for that sort of cultural resource. So we're not going to go looking specifically in areas where work isn't going to be done, but we are looking in areas that are going to be potentially disturbed. And again, we continue to coordinate with the tribes on those issues.
Here, Chris. So I'll address the first issue as well regarding the letter and the David Carpenter information. So we have previously responded on, David Carpenter's issues. I think that's a matter for the record, and refresh my memory, the letter either refers to some publicly available document, I think, that's available for anybody to look up online. So I'm just going to say that it's in our response is in the record, and it's based on the science that we are currently following.
Okay, so I see Judy Herkimer from
Heal has her hand up online, so Judy, you want to open the floor for you to speak? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of comments and one question. Chris Smith and the other gentleman, and your name Josh, are you both project managers?
So yeah, clarify your roles.
Yes, Chris and I are both project managers for the site, in addition to Rich Fisher and Alex Carly-Dorsey. Because this site is so large, we've expanded the team to be able to cover the many different topics and issues associated with implementing the remedy.
And you're based in Pittsfield at the EPA office that we've always traditionally gone to?
We are both based out of Region 1 headquarters, which is in Boston, but we make frequent trips out here.
Oh, okay, so there's no one on site at all times?
EPA has a contractor that is located here, that is here full-time.
And that contractor is?
HDR, and they have a subcontractor, Taconic Ridge, that all provide support and comments on all documents.
And Taconic Ridge and HDR are based out of the Pittsfield office?
They have their own office in Pittsfield, yes.
Their own office outside of the, other than the EPA office in Pittsfield?
So the Valley Street office is no longer open. We went through some reorganization with contracting aspects and a lot of administrative stuff associated with the agency, and we ended up having giving up our office space. And if we come and need office space here, we have deals with HDR to use office space if we need it.
I see. Okay, thank you. That helps immensely to kind of know the lay of the land. This is fascinating that LiDAR might become an integral component to this section of removal action. As many of you know, over the decades, General Electric workers came to HRI. HRI had an anonymous 800 number that they had, and they turned in innumerable barrel sites. And HRI, collated all of that, handed it in to Mass DEP, and I don't know how many were attempted to be found, and the ones that remain on the list with no investigation. So just wondering if the LiDAR is used in this section of the river, and you should happen to come across one of those PCB barrel sites, will that be articulated on the LiDAR? Will you overtly be able to identify it? And would that be something that you would put into the administrative record?
So as I had mentioned during the presentation, I briefly talked about limitations. So the smaller the object is when you're using LiDAR, dependent on the size of the area, you're going to run into issues with resolution. Very tiny objects, if you're using aerial LiDAR, can often be mistaken. You're not going to know necessarily what the LiDAR is detecting, specifically for ground penetrating. So when you look at those results, you tend to see masses that warrant further investigation. That could be a boulder, it could be a foundation, it could be anything. So any anomalies that would be found in these LiDAR surveys would then trigger a second phase of having to look deeper into what that may be in that respect.
Thank you. And my last question or request is regarding a tour of the UDF site by the CCC members and within reason, members, citizens of Lee, and any other stakeholders who would like to take a tour of the UDF area. Many other people have been invited by EPA entities, like the press. And many people, even in Lee, don't even know what the UDF area looks like. So I would like to put that forward, that as soon as the weather breaks and maybe we get through mud season, that the citizens who are going to have to perhaps live with this UDF in perpetuity that they at least be given the courtesy of a tour, like the many tours that have already been given to other interests. Thank you all.
Judy will take that under consideration, thanks.
Thank you, Annie.
Okay, so I see a number of hands. Try not to trip here. Sorry. All right.
So I just wanted, I see some hints from members of the public, so we're going to do public comment in about 20 minutes. Okay, so stay tuned, we'll get to you for sure. Very treacherous. Okay. So Valerie, I saw your hand for a while, I'm going to come to you, so if you're comfortable, introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Valerie Anderson from the Housatonic Clean River Coalition. I live in Pittsfield, and I've been a member of the CCC for about 18 years, something like that. So I didn't understand this exchange between Tim and Ani, nor did I read the letter Tim was referencing, but is it EPA's position that PCBs don't volatilize?
You know what, I'm going to come over there, just to make it easy.
Because I have follow-up as well. Thank you.
Sure, I don't believe that is our position. I think we were specifically responding to the information that was submitted either by David Carpenter or the David Carpenter information that was submitted by somebody else, so.
So what, you're disputing David Carpenter's analysis, is that what it is?
I'm just going to encourage you to read the record. The letter does cite to our formal response, you know, and that I think it provides a comprehensive enough answer.
Well, I'm not too good at reading things, so could you tell me what you meant?
So I don't have that information readily available, you know, and I'm going to say that nobody from the team is prepared to talk about this today. If you want to put this on an agenda topic for another meeting.
Yes, I would be, and I find it a little bit disconcerting and suspicious that EPA doesn't want to talk about something so major as to whether PCBs volatilize, which means for people who don't know, get in the air and you breathe them. This is crucial. And if you're, dancing around that sort of worries me. So I do want to have that as an agenda item. And another thing I'd like to add was at the beginning where our guidelines were suggested, it said that the CCC says that all members should strive to attend all meetings. So I'm asking, where's GE now? GE hasn't been here in years, and I can understand that during litigation they didn't want to, come here and say something that could be used against them. So, but the litigation is now over and GE should be here. And so I think that you as the facilitator should reach out to GE and insist that they be here. They are the people responsible for all this pollution, and they're hiding.
And I'll just say I'm very happy to reach out to GE with that request. I don't know how they'll receive me, but I will reach out. Okay. All right, so more hands. I'm going to go to Claire. Claire, introduce yourself. You're comfortable.
Yes, I'm Claire Leahy. I am a resident of Lee. I just wanted to go back to the UDF site, and I think that you should recognize the fact that that is the highest point on in that area, on the river, and it has not been disturbed for years, and that's where LiDAR should be used, is up on that area that is still treed. And I don't think it's been disturbed. I know you've said that it's been mined formally, but that was the buffer zone that Lane Construction had between the sand pits and Woodland Road, and that has stayed pristine. And I have found myself remnants of a stone wall in that area right near the one vernal pool that I pointed out many times. So I just would like to see more attention given to the artifacts that may be there. I would just see that as a Indian lookout. I mean, you could see all the way up the river from the top. That was a wonderful lookout back in, before it all became mined. You could see pictures of people from Lennox standing up on the hill, top of the hill, when it was a pasture and looking out over the view. So that's important to me, and also on the volatilization. And I brought this up before, the fact that we're living up and down the river, and we've been facing this for so many years, and I think we should be told now what the level of PCBs in the area is, so that somebody like me that's having problems in my family with cancer and I'm only 300 feet from the river should know whether or not it's safe to go on living there or move on to some other place. Thank you.
Does anyone on EPA want to address the volatilization, air testing, or the other issues that were raised?
Just very, very briefly, I just want to note, like, we're not trying to hide anything. Our response is in the public record for anybody to read. We're just not prepared to talk about it in detail here tonight. You know, I'm just going to say again, Dean Taliaferro is not here. He is the one that's been on the site the longest. He could probably talk to you at great length about this issue, but we are just not prepared. We're happy to have this as an agenda topic for the next time.
I just want to, we do also hear the request for some kind of summary of what's in the public record that's accessible to the public, right? So that's a request I think that's being made here today. Julia, I'm going to go to you.
Oh yeah, okay, so my name is Julia, and I'm trying to piece together a few different through lines, but I should also start just by saying that my training is very interdisciplinary, so I kind of like to go at stuff from all different angles, but I'm also, you know, kind of a Jill of all trades and master of none, if you will. So, which I think can be of benefit in certain ways with this project. So on the subject of, you know, following the EPA science, one question that I have, which I'll talk more about before asking for your answer, is on the subject of kind of the idea of the cumulative impact assessment, and which I understand to be kind of a newer and a sort of important aspect of EPA's sort of commitment to environmental justice, that you have to incorporate all of the range of types of stressors, both chemical and non-chemical, to which people are exposed on a daily basis when you make a decision about the impact of something like exposure to trucks. And so this is something that we have, you know, been hearing a lot from Dr. Kenny and the Tri-Town people, and that I've been doing a lot of research into. So, you know, just thinking about the sort of parameters that were outlined in the quality of life compliance plan, you know, how do those interact with each other? And how do they interact with mental health stress that people are already experiencing, knowing that trucks may be driving down their streets, that they may be living in, you know, an area where they're daily getting exposed to volatilized PCBs, so that even irrespective of the actual exposure, the perception or the fear of the exposure, that actually has a tangible negative effect on one's physical health. And then you add the layers of sort of social determinants of health and like, you know, the sort of, there are pockets of people who are lower income in areas where the dump is going to be, and in Pittsfield and throughout the region, there's a lot of inequality. So it just seems like it would be helpful to have such a study conducted, because it seems like there are some variables that aren't being looked at that could be helpful. So I guess is that something that GE or you all have planned? Yeah. And I have a follow-up question too.
The EJ element.
Yes.
Great. Anyone feel equipped to respond on environmental justice issues and how they might apply or be reviewed here?
Let's get back to, we'll get back to her.
Okay, so request heard and...
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Which is, relatedly, can you clarify what the status of the entire site is as far as the sort of Superfund designation? Because my understanding is it's a sort of unusual hybrid where it's a Superfund site, but it's not regulated by CERCLA, which, you know, I don't understand all the details of that, but I was struck by the fact that if you use the EJ screen tool, the mapping tool, it's not on there. Like this site isn't on there, and that just seems very problematic, I guess, so.
Great, so a question around Superfund designation and how that relates to kind of EJ screen issues, right?
So this is a Superfund site. It is not on the national priorities list of Superfund sites. It was proposed but never finalized, but it is still a Superfund site. And so that's answer one there. And as to why it's not on EJ screen, we'd have to take a look at that. I don't know the answer to that.
Julie, does that clarify it, or are you still going to have some confusion about what that means?
The question is, how can it get on there? Because it seems like it should be, and that's
So-
not something you can answer.
So Julia, just for people in the online, Julia asked if it's not on EJ screen, how can it get on there? And so that's something we'll look into.
Okay, Charlie, gonna go to you now.
Thank you, Charlie Champerini again, Citizens for PCB Removal. I have a question for John. The Citizens Coordinating Council, which that's what we're here for, was created via the consent decree, and it has to do with community relations. But nowhere, the closest I get to why it's here, why it exists, from the consent decree document is Citizens Coordinating Council shall mean a council established with respect to the site as referenced in section XXXVI of this consent decree. And when you go there, it does not really say, we have created this Citizens Coordinating Council. So it doesn't give any definition of what this is. Could you please find somewhere in your vast knowledge of how it got created and what its purpose is? Because it is for community relations, it's Citizens Coordinating Council, and just anything that you could get back to me, I would appreciate of what its purpose is. That's my question to you, John. You don't have to answer that right now. So I've been a long-term member. My wife was on this since the day it was established. and sat with Judy and Tim and many others. And what always happened during presentations was that CCC members were allowed to ask questions during the presentations as they were going. Sometimes it's very important during the presentation to stop and kind of clarify what's going on here. This is BS. And I don't know if this is because now this is your job to run this, or if EPA requested that something got changed, but this is really inappropriate. We are specifically on this council to be able to ask questions. We used to be able to ask them to GE. They no longer come. Dean is probably pleased that he's not here tonight, so we're going to pick on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 EPA people. And that's what happens, because we have nobody else to be frustrated with except somebody who's here in authority. And believe me, we really wish it was GE. But that's another thing. I would also like to make a statement that any groups, anything I've ever been involved with, from formal annual meetings of large organizations or whatever, it has always had the ability to modify an agenda and the order of agenda items, always. The fact that you just say, we're never going to do that again, that's inappropriate, Toby. That's not fair. That's not fair to us. It's not fair to the public. It's not fair to anyone that you cannot modify an agenda item. I mean, they just went ahead and did it anyway. It wasn't on the agenda, and they still took their 3 or 4 minutes. And I understand that they have a job to do. That's not Annie's fault that she had something there that she needed to get. But it wasn't on the agenda, and then you come back at us and say, we can't change an agenda. This is it. This is it. You can always change an agenda, and that I want you to consider and think about. And I hope that this was not something that the EPA said has to be in stone. You need to do it, and I would. So again, like that is an option always. I disagree that CCC members have to wait until all the presentations are done. We should be allowed to ask questions as we are here. And if Dean was here, I'd be yelling at him too. So it's not personal.
Understood.
It's just the way it is.
Understood.
And I think that's it for me from now. Thank you.
So I just want to say, Charlie, perfectly fine to criticize me, criticize how the agenda is made, what's in there. That's all fair game, okay? And I think it's clear that, this. Yeah, I hear it, and listen, my thinking on this is, we can certainly do better in how these agendas come together, right? And I think I have a goal of improving that, okay? So let's think about it, right? Clearly this wasn't working for you, okay? But I'm here to talk with anybody about how they want this to work, and if we can find a more inclusive way, right, that gets the full voices in the CCC involved in a meaningful way in how these agendas are set, I think that's great, right? If we can make that more collaborative, okay. I'm all for it, all right? I'm not going to kind of go into the details of why this was today the way it is, and I think, but we can talk about how these get set moving forward. But I think, Josh, you want to say something about this as well?
Instead again.
Yeah. It's not, it's working, but it's coming in and out.
It's you, Toby.
So
it really did work for everybody else.
Toby has a touch. So Charlie, we appreciate the feedback on the agenda. In the past, Pat tried very hard to get agenda items and often would go without any feedback, and we're very appreciative that both you and Claire reached out about topics you would like to discuss tonight. That's how we want to move these forward. There are certain topics that need to be shared with the CCC and public, In a lot of cases, we've kind of gotten derailed from the overall agenda in the past, that we weren't able to give time to at least address what the adaptive management, for instance, the adaptive management plan or the quality of life. In regards to moving the tag, now that the tag advisor has been awarded, at least it's the agency's opinion, that it makes sense to share what documents are currently open so the public can hear what is currently open for input, so that you as the tag advisor can share their thoughts on what documents are coming or which documents they're going to be focusing their time on, because that's a major purpose of the tag, is to advise on those different documents. And if we can never get to those details, it runs into the concern of, will everybody else know about what other documents are coming?
No, it's not.
Come over and stand, we'll do a duet.
I think we can everybody hear
I don't
Charlie?
think
anyway?
online you can
Oh.
really speak
Yeah, it's
loudly.
Okay,
so-
okay, all right, no worries.
So here's the issue about the tag advisor. The tag advisor works for HRI, and we are the go-between. And as much as we understand that Dr. Hermanson can present, the CCC is not necessarily the place where HRI wants him to say some of the things that we want him to say to us. We want to be able to help disseminate some of the information. He works for us. He doesn't work for the EPA. He doesn't work for, we are representing the community. So, yes, we do want him here. We want him part of it. And if there's things that are important for him to say in front of a CCC meeting, that's fine. But primarily, his communication is with us, so that we can then tell the community what his thoughts are. And that's how he gets paid, so that's what it's for. So thanks.
Sorry, I probably misspoke. I wasn't saying that he has to, by any means, comment on any of the documents that are coming. It's more along the lines that we want everybody to be aware of what documents are, so if there is a document that somebody is interested in and they want to contact HRI and have a question for the advisor, that they have the capability to do that. And it was our hope that by going through the presentations, like I know we had it originally scheduled for 50 minutes. I had my timer going. We got it through in 25, which has provided over an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes for open discussion and such. So we're hoping to keep our presentations short and brief like they are, 10,000-foot views of what the documents are, and allow questions to come out through that discussion. So it wasn't in any malice to move the tag update. We just wanted the opportunity to share the information so that if there's any input that you wanted to provide on saying documents that the advisor will be reviewing based off of what we shared, that would be addressed. You could make that comment during that update.
Okay, thank you. Everybody hear that? Thank you.
Okay, so
welcome.
I see you there. Why don't you go ahead and go up to the mic, because I think we're having some issues with this mic, although now it's working. Go figure. And then I wanted to guess, after this, let's go to public comment. I think you've all been waiting very patiently.
Okay, on the subject of how this group works together, I really felt from the very beginning that we should be talking to each other right here and seeing if we have some consensus amongst the council on items that we want to address. There's no opportunity to really have this discussion that we need to have. And I did do a research of EPA's major whole site, and there is a section on citizens coordinating councils being recommended that they be set up. This was not just in the consent decree. This has a precedent, and it's there for everybody to read, and it goes into the facilitator helping them organize and have a set of bylaws. and some rules on how they are going to run these meetings. So I think we need to have a little more participation. I'd love to see more people sitting at the table. And it's just unfortunate that people can't really come in person. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks.
Yeah, so one thing just to name, Claire, on your piece about sort of facilitator helping people engage and sort of think about how they want the meetings to be run and the bylaws. We do have some CCC protocols, right? And we're happy to send those around if folks want to see them. They were defined some years ago. And if this group feels strongly like some of that needs to be rethought, right? If we need to have some sort of more ways for people to have input on agendas in advance, for example, maybe I send out a survey or something, a little more formal way for people to get input, and then we can share that with the group, right? But we're very open to that, okay? I just want to say, this is intended to be, all of our space.
I guess what I want to do is ask the group, do you want to be able to talk to each other and ask each other questions while we're in this situation? Is this something that we want to have happen? And can we ask each other, hey, do you agree with what I'm trying to say at this point? So do we need to put that on the agenda, the format of the meetings for the next meeting?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's also possible for folks who are interested in this to talk to me and we can get a group together, right? There are a couple ways to think about it. I would just say, my understanding is you are perfectly fine to talk to each other. If you want to ask another CCC member a question, right, do your placard, ask it, we can go to them, right? I don't see anything in our protocol preventing that from happening.
I'd like to see it happen in the meeting. I don't want to see it outside groups going and talking separately about things. I think we have a lot of special interest groups here, and we've got to be sure that we're all on the same page in this group. It's very important that we do that. Every board I've ever been on, you just had to make sure that the conversations took place in the room and that you didn't go out and have these what we call parking lot discussions, because that's where the power of the group starts falling apart. And I don't think that this group has the power that they need because of the way it's set up. So I really would push, and I can't really ask for a show of hands because that's not the way it's set up. But is there a show of hands?
I have no problem if you want to ask for a show of hands. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, you've got one public entity who's here, where normally you have, 4 or 5 maybe.
I can't see.
And it's just.
I'm Jim from the city of Pittsfield.
Yeah.
Oh, Jim, okay.
And that's, I think the weather, the rain, the time of year, just kind of really made it that people aren't here.
Could we get to the question and answer?
Can we move on, please?
Yes.
So, CCC members, I think we're getting some understandable requests from members of the public to do public comment. So can I just see some hands who would like to make public comment? So we have 3 folks, and how many folks online do we have, Brandon, who want to make a public comment?
None yet, but just...
None yet. So if you would like to make a public comment and you're online, please go ahead and raise your hand if you're a member of the public and an attendee. We will see that. If you're having any issues, you can use the question and answer to get in touch with Brandon. Okay, but members of the public online, raise your hand. We have some folks here in person, so I'm just going to go right to left because I saw your hand first, ma'am. So please go ahead and come to the mic. And I think we have 25 minutes here, so I don't think we're going to run into any issues with time. Okay, so go ahead.
I just wanted to...
so if you'd like to identify yourself.
I'm a citizen of Lee and a professional wetland scientist. I just wanted to talk about the LiDAR. For the archaeology part and the investigation of remnants of Indian villages or whatever, have you ever considered having GE use ground penetrating radar? Can you do that on the site? it seems like that would maybe be more effective than LiDAR.
Yeah, I can answer that. I'll come up here. So what we did, or what the plan is, like in Reach 5A, for example, the first stretch of Rest River to be remediated, is that in the floodplain, GE initially had to identify areas where there was suitable characteristics to potentially find artifacts, like well-drained soils, for example. Now they've taken those areas and other areas of historic importance and overlaid it with where the remediation is going to occur, at least their first proposal for where the remediation will occur. Now we're going to go back to those areas and do actual test pitting, like taking cores to look for those sort of artifacts. So I think we're actually going beyond what a ground penetrating radar can do. We're going to actually be potentially finding things that are in the subsurface.
Okay, so you're not, I'm not sure.
There's not a need to use ground penetrating radar because we're actually going to be looking in the field. We're going to be physically digging small holes to look for the presence of artifacts.
Okay, you can pick a lot more information from the radar though. Okay, and then I'm a little nervous tonight. I might ask you to come back because I'm just.
Great. I think we'll have time for you to come back if you want to get your thoughts together. Okay. So I think, do you want to say something, Josh?
Yeah, I'll just add on the GPR, ground penetrating radar. It is a great tool. I've used it at many sites myself. There are restrictions. As I mentioned earlier, every technology has limitations. And the problem with ground penetrating radar is it works best on a very flat surface. So what we're dealing with a lot of, and it's also, so in most cases, you'll see it used, it'll look like someone's pushing a lawnmower, when in reality, it's actually a radar system that is scanning what's below. Again, getting to what LiDAR does, different technologies by all means, but it's not going to tell you exactly what you see. When you're looking at the imagery, the person that's running the equipment will have a little screen and they'll see a disturbance below what's there. It's not going to show an arrowhead, it's not going to show a foundation, it's not going to show a body, it's going to show a mass that will locate or provide areas of further investigation. And that's where you end up doing additional research, or not research, sorry, investigations, like Chris was talking about the test pitting, or borehole drilling, or anything of that sort, to see what type of object that is. I've done a lot of work throughout the nation, and most of the time, it's a boulder, or it's a cobblestone, or it's some mass, but we still do the investigation to look for it. So there is a level of cultural resource investigation that goes with every single design plan, and that all falls in line as we move from the conceptual design to the final design and forward, if that helps a little bit.
Thank you. So I think, did you have your hand up as well, sir, or you can go ahead? Okay. So great. Please feel free to introduce yourself if you're willing, and go ahead.
I'm Charles Kenny from the Tri-Town Board of Health. Good evening. I want to thank the CCC for having this meeting and the region for being here. I would like specifically to ask, to request something related to the transportation plan. I would like to ask the region to have someone beside GE do the evaluation of the comparative benefits of rail versus truck. I do not trust GE. Now, I'm going to be very specific. I'll refer to Mr. Josh Fontaine. I think he brought up the fact that the use of rail will remove, or let's put it this way, that the trucks that go through Lee, the major carriers of the PCBs out of town, out of sight, will go right through Lee. And the off-site transportation by rail would obviate that. In other words, if we had rail in place to take the material out of county, the high PCB concentrations, to the TSCA sites, I'm just talking about the 50 milligrams per kilogram or higher, the truckload going through the town of Lee would be minimized considerably. Now that's what Josh Fontaine spoke about, and that is something, now there's a lot of frustration going on, and I apologize if it seems that I am frustrated sometimes too. I believe you're trying to do a good job. I want to trust you. And so I ask you to live by your word. In the final permit of 2020, you state that the permittee should examine measures that maximize the transport of PCBs off-site. That was in the 2016 permit also. Now, the single measure that maximizes the transportation by rail off-site, that makes it most efficacious, is to have rail transport the material on-site, because the major impediment, the major cost, the major effort, all of the major planning and design that goes into exporting the PCBs off-site has already been done if you put it on-site. And you have never, ever looked at the transportation of the PCBs less than 50 milligrams per kilogram to the local UDF. That is the key factor. Now, when GE made this proposal in the fall, not only was I upset about that, but you received letters from the select boards of all of the towns in the rest of the river. It's not just me who's upset. West Stockbridge got involved in that. You also received letters separately from each of the boards of health. We're all concerned about our towns. Now, if you want us to trust you, do what you say, make GE do what you're saying it should do. If you look at your final permit, you'll say that I'm exactly on the mark with what I'm saying. If you can understand, if you want me to trust you and believe you're doing a good job, read that. Make GE do that. Understand that I don't trust GE after they spent all that time. You know, I agree with you. Waiting, delaying is not in anybody's best interest. Look at all the time GE has wasted. You should be outraged. You should be outraged for us. You shouldn't just say that you recognize that they didn't do a good job. They did a terrible job. They wasted all of this time. And your final permit says they should examine the measures that maximize the off-site transport by rail. If you want everybody to trust you, make them do that, or get somebody else who will. Thank you.
Anyone respond?
May I?
Yeah, please.
Just very quickly, thank you, Dr. Kenny. You're absolutely right about the language in the permit that says we should maximize the extent practical of rail transport. We're well aware of that. You know, as I said before, this is just a first draft. We are absolutely going to, you know, be commenting on this. GE is responsible under the permit to do the first evaluation. EPA oversees their work. You know, we do either issue comments or issue conditions or disapprove plans, and we are going to require them to do more.
Well, I'd like to say just one other thing. You know, I very much appreciate you're trying to do a good job. I hope you understand that. But you know, I'm an elected public official. I'm responsible for the safety, the public health of my communities. And you have a petition from our small towns with 2,000 people. The reason that there's such a disconnect here, I'm not going to get into it, it has to do with the methodology that we arrived at the 2020 permit. I'm not interested in challenging it now. But the idea here is that GE has already wasted all of our time, and the wording of the permit isn't that you should do that. You're telling GE that the permittee should do that, and GE wasted all of that time and didn't even look at it. Go to U of Mass and have them do it. I would trust them. They're going to do a better job than GE. GE is going to do the same thing. The other thing that I'm going to say that I'm just frustrated about is you're closing down the public comment period in 2 weeks. We have not had a legitimate look at the transport by rail. We haven't looked at that. And I've spoken to Parker Rodriguez. They can do a whole lot of things that I know you guys don't believe me, but it's true. He told me that. And if you find out that the trucks are the better way to do it, I'll go with it. I have no other agenda. But I want the truth out there. And if you're going to put these things into the agreements, I want you to do it. You can't let GE get away with this and just say that, you know, they didn't do a good job. They did a horrible job. They should be removed from that responsibility. I do not trust them. And we don't have any agenda for where we're going to be able to talk again. If you have GE do this, let's say in April, we don't have a public comment period posted that we know that we can say something. It just goes down into this dark tunnel. And we're never going to be able to say anything that we know about. Maybe we can, but this is another cause of frustration. We don't know if we're going to be able to say anything. So all we have is this very limited window now closing in, and an egregiously incompetent, and I'm being generous to GE when I say this, I believe I'm being very generous.
So again, I'm just going to note, you know, we will comment on the plan. GE will have to submit a revised plan. That will also go out for public comment. The first, no, absolutely will go out for public comment. The first plan went out for public comment for 90 days. We'll probably do something similar on the revision. Regarding the wasting of time, the one thing I just want to note is that, again, we are still hard at work on making sure that the design of you know, actually addressing the contaminated material in the reaches is occurring, and that's proceeding, and it's proceeding concurrently. And really, until that work is done, nothing's coming out of the river. So, you know, it's not like the submission of this deficient plan has fatally delayed work. We're still continuing to do that work, and that's going to take some time, irrespective of what's going on with the decisions on transportation and disposal. So, but thank you, and yes, we are absolutely going to be evaluating that.
Thanks, Annie. Dr. Kenny, I just want to clarify for the record, I think earlier you said Josh Fontaine made comments from I think you meant Josh Bloom, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay, sure. So I think we want to go to someone online now. So Ruby Chang is gonna have an opportunity to make public comment now. So we can hear you now, Ruby.
Thank you so much. I represent the Board of Health for Great Barrington. During these talks, which I am relatively new to and I feel guilty about, is the fact that we are there to protect the environment as the stand of the EPA, but I don't hear anyone speaking about the protection of people's health. I don't see anyone consulting the medical profession to look at studies that have been done during PCB remediation plans that have been executed in the past throughout this country. We have not seen any medical consultation as to the safety of the people during and 10 years later after the remediation has been performed. There's not been any data about the amount of illness that occurs in the population. And I find that we're talking about public health and the health of the people. Why isn't the medical profession consulted on this remediation plan?
Judy, do you want to respond?
So thank you for the comment. You know, at Superfund sites, EPA has very specific procedures on how we assess human health risk. And, you know, I might suggest that maybe, you know, what might be the most helpful here, you know, Ruby, is if we perhaps arrange a separate meeting with your Board of Health to sort of talk through those, because those Superfund procedures can be very complicated. And, you know, I think it might be helpful if we have a conversation, you know, so perhaps we'll be reaching out to you on that.
I would really like to look at what data you have about medical studies that have been done with these remediation plans that have been executed even 10 years out. And this is, I'm a doctor. I can understand what is a reputable consultation process, and you practice medicine dependent on what the research shows. I have not seen anything put out by any of these discussions that help us understand better what are the health risks.
Okay, so we do have, again, you know, human health risk assessments that we've done pursuant to Superfund procedures on the different parts of the overall GE Pittsfield Housatonic River site, which we can certainly share with you. When it comes down to, you know, actual health risk, like, you know, things like cancer clusters or whatever, that's a little bit beyond the scope of our authority. But, you know, again, I think it might be helpful for us to have a conversation about that.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, so I see a hand there in the back, and I'm going to get to both of you whose hands I also see. So yes, in the back, please come on up.
Hi, I'm Danny. I live in Lenox, and I live right across the street from the Housatonic River and the landfill. And I'm not here to be very scientific. I'm just here to talk about how I feel, and I feel that people around me feel. This is a dystopian nightmare. You know, Berkshire's is a gem. We have Tanglewood, we have the Mount, in Lenox, we have Joe's Diner, we have people that have lived here for generations, a lot longer than me. And then we have the remnants of GE in Pittsfield, and people getting cancer in Pittsfield. And a recent story about a child who has brain cancer, and there's lawsuits, and I know that many people have already gotten cancer in the past. And this idea that we're now going to expand some idea that's supposed to make things better, while, you know, people walk down my street to enjoy and get healthy, and they walk to the lake and they walk to the pond. And I just try to figure out, like, what nightmare am I in? Is this the Aaron Brockovich movie? Is this the civil case movie with John Travolta in it? And like, it's like we just see like history repeating itself. You know, the Indians used to live here along the river, and it's just like we keep screwing things up, and it just goes on, and it's just like, you know, like, when is this going to end? And I would hope that there is a more smart way to handle all this, and the idea that there's going to be trucks maybe running around with PCBs and all coming to this area, you know, from different areas. We're all going to let's all in and bring it to right next to the towns of Lee and Lenox, and it is very depressing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, Danny Hillsop from Stockbridge, and I was one of a team of 3 people who gathered petitions stop the trucks, switch to rail. And so I had the opportunity of standing in front of my town's post office and, you know, people, approaching people for the signatures, and which I guess we got close to 400, which is a lot in a town the size of Stockbridge. The responses were so rough, you know. It's a no-brainer, you know, or, you know, why don't I know more about this? Why don't I know the information? How come you're telling me how many truckloads and where is it coming from? And so there was this feeling of not knowing, you know. And remember, Stockbridge is probably one of the wealthiest and definitely the most highly educated citizenry in Berkshire County, and they're telling me that they don't know. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is more relates to what the gentleman just spoke about earlier. It was, thank you so much for doing this. It's really important that you're standing up here and doing this. The implication was that what I was doing required courage in the face of my community's sense of fear. Living downstream on the Housatonic River with so many deaths from cancer along our main street, West Main Street, Goodrich Street, Park Street, the district, East Main Street, going up into South Lee, going up into Lee itself. I can't speak for Lennoxdale. We all know. We know what happens to if you caddied at the Stockbridge golf course. You know, we know this. You know, I canoed on the river. I know the river in a way that is special to me. And I can see the river changing. The river is changing. It's not the picture of LiDAR. LiDAR is an illusion. It's a fixed moment in time. The river is moving, and what's moving it and what's accelerating the motion of everything in the river is climate change. Climate change. The speed at which the rates of precipitation are concentrating and coming down the way they have in Leominster, or with Hurricane Irene, or Iceland, or New York City, where we are having 100-year, 200-year events all around us. And we have a cleanup plan which is dependent on holding the 75% of the PCBs above this dam. After the cleanup, the dam is a component. And do you know, have you guys looked at what the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says is what the safety levels are, how that dam is going to respond to climate change flooding? It's really amazing. I mean, I've looked at it, and I can see the dam has already failed by overtopping in 36, in 1938, in 1949, which was a 200-year event, 54, and then in Irene, and we're going to wait now for the 13 years or maybe more. Maybe GE can drag it out some more. I think we should really be looking at the sense of urgency that we face. And think about the people who live in the towns downstream, below the dam, the constrictions, all those towns, Lee, Stockbridge, Housatonic, Great Barrington, they're all located at the Narrows, and that was because they were set there for water power. And when you get 10 feet going over the dam at Woods Pond, bringing down those PCBs down, and we're sitting here talking about slow and thoughtful responses and trunking, for us, we like rail because we can see that it can happen all along the river at the same time, that you can get the job done. I just really think that the climate aspect of this has been way, way underlooked at. And it is the elephant in the room. And it's probably why GE has finally come to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And you've been very patient. Please go ahead.
My name is Shirley Miller, and I'm from Stockbridge. And I wanted to bring to attention this the thing that I just found on the internet today. It says the alternate PCB extraction methods and amendments to PCB cleanup and disposal regulations, which is a new EPA regulation that gets into effect on February 26th. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to.
So I just want to encourage you to get close to the mic.
And it says there could be, it's a long document, but it says there could be investigations in other ways, newer ways of disposing of the PCBs. And I am firmly believe that they should not be taken out of the river. They should be treated in the river. I know that I've looked into what Connecticut has done along the river. I could not see any information about PCBs, but they have restored the banks, and they have pictures of their fish and clean water in their river down there. So I don't know how they did it, but I think it's worth looking into, and that this new regulation allows for further investigation. Thank you.
Checking. Gail, did you want to continue your comment? Okay, Tim, I see your hand. We'll get to you right after.
In a previous CC meeting, Cordelia, I can't remember her last name, but anyway, she asked the question. If we came up with the money, can we just ship the PCBs out of town? And that never got answered. And it seems like the feeling is amongst citizens that EPA is siding with GE, and we feel like we're being steamrolled over. And we would like that question answered. If you did answer it, I apologize for not seeing it, but could you please answer that question? Because we really, if we can raise the money somehow, we'd like to see it shipped out of town. I don't agree with a lot of the project. I don't agree that you should be putting fabric down on the bottom of the river bed. I think that's crazy. There's a lot of things that are going on with this project that I think are a little bit crazy, quite honestly. But there's no way that landfill should be installed. And we are all feeling I feel very anxious. Every time I leave one of these meetings, I cannot sleep. Because it just doesn't make sense to me. This whole plan doesn't make sense to me. This rest of the river group, none of them have any environmental or health education. And I don't even know how a private citizen like Jeffrey Cook even got on the board. How does he get influence? I don't get this whole group. And it really stinks. We all think it's corrupt. Anybody who is against this thinks the whole situation is corrupt because everybody got money, including the towns. And I just really want that question answered. If we can get this stuff trucked out of town, then, if that's the best we can do at this point, I would like to see that happen. And I really don't think you should be putting fabric at the bottom of the riverbed. I think that's just doesn't make sense to me at all. Thank you.
I think it was, if you could raise the money to get it trucked out, yeah.
If we could do that.
We'll get back to
We'll
Gail.
get back to you. Okay. Great. So, Tim, I'm going to hand it to you for the final comment. Looks like we're a bit past 8, but no worries. The final word. Yeah.
Okay. No microphone? I'll just have to...
Yeah, just speak. Well, you can go back there if you'd like. Yeah.
All right, I'll just speak from here because I got a pretty loud voice. I just want to let you know about the first responders of Berkshire County's report about what happens if the Woods Pond Dam flows in the line of what Denny was talking about. And basically, what they say is that the Woods Pond, what do they call it? The first responders call the Woods Pond Dam is an environmental disaster waiting to happen. Pretty powerful. I live a mile down the river. I now have ideas that I'm going to be floating with my wife down the river when that dam goes. And you know what they say? They say, if it blows, everybody's got to run for high ground. That's what it says. This is absurd. And then they say, once you get up on the high ground, don't go back to your house because you won't be able to get there and you're putting your life in danger. That's all I need to say.
Want to respond to that?
So I am the project manager that follows up a lot on the dams associated with this project. Specifically for just general information, GE owns both Woods Pond and Rising Pond Dam. They're responsible for operating, monitoring, and maintenance of said dam, in addition to submitting reports on the condition and inspecting it quarterly, among other different inspections associated with it. That being said, later this year, GE is required to update both of the Rising Pond and Woods Pond operation, monitoring, and maintenance plans, which will be open for public input and review. And in addition, a portion of that is also updating the emergency action plan, which is what Tim was discussing, which explains how a town would happen to respond if there was a catastrophic event at the dam. That being said, at one point, I just wanted to mention, Danny, and we've talked about this before, Woods Pond specifically was replaced in the 80s. It is not the same dam that had as many issues as you were discussing back in the 60s, 40s, and 50s. The dam is built in a form Matt, to, if it is overtopped, that it will stay intact. And the most recent biannual Phase 1 engineering inspection plan is due from GE in the beginning of February, which goes into the specifics about the dam itself and any concerns that may be associated with, including deficiencies or if there's any type of monitoring events. So if anybody's interested in reviewing that plan, that will be coming out in early February, and that will be for both the Woods Pond and Rising Pond Phase 1 inspections.
Who owns Woods Pond Dam?
GE.
GE does.
Yes, they own both of those. In addition to the project, there are non-GE owned dams that GE is responsible for providing monitoring to ensure that there is no conveyance of sediment downstream of those dams. Those dams include the Columbia Mill, the Willow Mill, and the Glendale. Currently for public input, the 2023 annual reports for both the Willow Mill and Columbia Mill Dam are open for comment, and that will be until April 16th. Don't have the date exactly, but it will be mid-April timeframe. So those are currently open for public input. And if there's any questions about that specifically, feel free to reach out to Ashlyn, and we can set up a meeting to discuss. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd just like to respond to that.
Yeah, please, Danny, quickly, just noting the time.
Yeah. I agree, I concur that the Valley Mill Dam was built in the 1800s, and it was replaced in 89, I believe, and it's about the same length. It's in almost the same location, not quite. And changes have been made to the canal and the different aspects of the dam to make it possible for the dam to survive, the dam itself to survive serious overtopping. However, what the dam does is it impounds the water coming down that valley. And if you look at the DCR site, you can see that DCR's dam site, you can see that the flood storage goes from, when it rains hard up in the hills, it goes from 460 acre feet storage at normal, that's what we usually expect to see up there, to 5,300 acre feet, which is a spectacular amount of change. And so that led me to go back and look at the data for the old Valley Mill Dam and try to understand, okay, how did all the PCBs, the thousands of pound PCBs, get down the river to the lakes in Connecticut? Way down there, 100 miles down the river, there's a lot of PCBs. And it's pretty obvious to me that the dam was overtopped in that 200-year event, which I told you about, 1949, the January 1, 1949 flood. And possibly in 38, which was famously high water, and that we've seen the data from the old Eagle Mill Dam, which I've given to EPA. And so what this means is, Tim, the dam doesn't have to be breached for the people who live in the dam inundation area, which is vastly underestimated in the the Woods Pond EAP. In fact, the Woods Pond EAP presented actually says that the towns themselves are responsible for locating those lines based on what information they can get. What you've got there now is based on 1980. It's 40 years out of date. The precipitation stuff. So it's a moving target. That's what I'm saying. And the information back in the let's see, I guess it was the 1987 Phase 2 inspection of Valley Mill said that, and I'm probably not going to get these numbers right, but that the height of the dam is 947.2, okay, above sea level. And at the spillway capacity is rated at 9 or 10%, and that gets it right up to the top of, the dam. And then when you go up to what the Army Corps recommends for a run-of-the-river dam, which is a 50% probable maximum flood, now we're talking about 10 or 12 feet of water going over the top of the dam. Think about that. That's why I went back and looked, because you don't see it in the current information. But that's what the Army Corps said in 1987. 10 or 12 feet at 50%. At 100%. 100%, how do you get to 100% probable maximum flood? They tell you.
Yeah, you just want to,
Yeah.
continue,
So
for 15 minutes
it's
over.
basically, it's 14 and a half hours of rain at a particular rate over 170 square miles of the watershed. And at that 100%, it's 20 feet, 20.1 feet over the dam. So in this era of climate change, it's a moving target. And everything that's built in that river was built in a climate change reality which no longer exists. That's pretty important. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you to everyone for coming, for participating. We have a number of takeaways. I've been jotting down some of these. We'll be looking through our notes. Just a couple of the ones that came out of the CCC. Part of the meeting were interest in a summary of what EPA's conclusions are on the volatilization issue. Some requests for follow-up on how to get this site on DEJ screen. Some interest in the facilitator reaching out to GE. I'll posted on that. And some interest in ensuring that our agenda development is inclusive, thinking about sort of how we can clarify the protocols. Okay, so we've heard all that. Thank you. In addition to other key takeaways that Brandon's noting, we'll adjourn the meeting. See you next time. Thank you all. Again, very happy to speak with anyone who wants to reach out personally. Have a great night.